Okay, this one that I'm working on now is one that I wish I had said no thanks, because I remember these things from when I had to work on them before. Nobody else in the shop would work on them. The other guy just threw his hands in the air and said he knew nothing. And they are a real pain in the ass. A lot of problems with these. Just a really bad design and just a horrible piece of equipment. Let's check it out. I have a Sansui XR-Q9. This is a fully automatic turntable. It's got a new cartridge or a new needle on it. This one here, you select your speed with the speed selector. Where's that light coming in here? Somewhere in here there's a light, but anyway, select 33 or 45 and you select your record size, 30 or 17 centimeters. And press the start stop button and it should move the arm over. And this one is not moving the arm. So that's the problem with this one. Let's take a look and see whether I'm able to resolve the issue with the non-functioning arm. Before I do anything, I always remove the needle. As you can see, this one, he says it's a new needle, but we can already see that this cantilever on here is damaged. And that's how I received it. So I just want to get a shot of that before I do any work, because that's how the needle came out of this unit. Remove the needle before I touch it, so that I don't damage it. Now Sansui, or Sansuzi as we used to call them, they took a page out of Sony's playbook for their direct drive turntables. It's got a couple of magnetic heads, just like you'd find in a tape recorder, and a brown tape type oxide on the inside that has recorded on that a tone. And that tone is picked up by these two heads, and that's used to determine the speed. So always be careful with these type of turntables. Don't get any magnets or anything near here, or you're going to end up demagnetizing this brown tape type oxide layer. And if that happens, well, you won't have a turntable that runs at the right speed. To take the bottom off this unit, rest assured the tone arm is not making contact with the bench. I've actually got it propped up, and I've got a rag under it so that there's no scratches. But I actually have the unit propped up, as you can see. So it's not touching the bench at all. 4 feet removed, and the base will lift off to reveal the inner workings of this unit. So this is the mechanism here that controls the arm. It's a little motor belt drive, and there is an optical sensor in the back here. And it's all controlled through this control board. Now how this works is the drive motor here turns this gear. This gear turns this other drive assembly, which has a rubber drive that turns this. This is a limited clutch. I'm just going to remove the mechanism here. I want to inspect underneath here. So it's held in place by a couple of screws. I think there's 3 screws that hold this in place. I should be able to lift this assembly off to look at the layout of it. So this is the underside of the clutch assembly. That white nylon wheel at the top of the screen there in my hand, that one, that's what actually turns both the arm lifting through the black clutch in behind it and the lower black clutch, which has got rubber. That solenoid underneath that copper disc actually raises and lowers the clutch by about 1 millimeter to either make contact with the gear, that one that I'm turning now, that turns the arm lifter, or with the tone arm to move the tone arm back and forth. It's slipping. The clutch itself is broken. I'm just going to remove the copper slip clutch just so that it doesn't get damaged while I'm working on the rest of it. So we'll just take that, remove it, and get it out of the way. I'm going to remove the E-clip and the rubber spacer so that I can open the clutch assembly up and inspect it to find out why it's slipping. So there's the clutch assembly. Now that rubber drive wheel, that's the one that actually turns the cam. So sometimes sometimes that grease dries up in there, although this one's turning freely, so that's not what's causing it. It's actually the clutch itself. I'm just pushing the solenoid there from the top. I took the copper disc off, by the way. You see it at the corner of the screen just so it didn't get damaged. It doesn't have to come off, but I just didn't want to damage it, so I took that off. And I'm just checking the clutch out now to see why it's not turning. I'm also going to remove the E-clip that holds the arm lifting cam, this little white lever up here. That's what rides up and down on the cam to raise and lower the arm. That's the cueing arm. And I'm going to remove that just so I can lubricate the shaft and lubricate the gear underneath it. In case you guys are wondering, I've got a cardboard box underneath the unit holding it up off the bench, so that there's nothing resting on the motor shaft or anything. It's sitting on a cardboard box that's propping it up. I'll be putting some moly coat on here when I'm done on both the cam for the arm as well as the cam for the brake, which is the metal lever my finger just touched there. Actually, I think that's what's happened. This was normally attached to this. It's not supposed to slip. This is broken off of here. I'm going to have to reattach that. That's why this is slipping, because this is part of the pressure clutch, and that is supposed to be attached. You see the four little pegs here, little pins that go into these holes, and they are supposed to be secured, and they are not. They've broken free. That's what's happened on this one. That's why it's slipping. So let's go ahead and fix that. I'm gonna have to glue that or something. Or when these units were still current, we used to change that clutch. I can't remember how many of those I changed, but it was lots. This part used to only be about $2 or $3. It was cheap, but it was the one part that kept failing over and over and over. I've tried to glue this thing with a couple of different adhesives, but we've got two different types of plastic, and the glue is just not going to hold. So I'm going to put this thing together and still not work, and I'm going to have to take it apart again. I'm going to cut all this crap out because you guys don't need to see me opening and closing this thing about a dozen times. It wasn't that many, but yeah, it was quite a few. In the end, I ended up having to actually rough up the surface,
I think that's how it
and
came apart.
I was then able to get some JB Weld to actually hold the pieces together because they were too smooth. I tried JB Weld and it just fell off. I ended up having to use my soldering iron to melt the plastic, melt little grooves into it to give the JB Weld something to grip on so that it wouldn't just slip. And it took me a while. So we're just going to put this thing back together. This isn't the only problem with this. Okay, this is just one of many problems. This turntable had more problems, as you will see. And I won't let the cat out of the bag.
Put on this other clip.
But this thing had
on.
at least 5 different problems.
Squeak, squeak, squeak.
There may be other problems still on this bloody thing. It was a terrible, and I mean a horrible design. This is one unit. You never want to buy one of these things.
Wires up from behind here so they don't get jammed.
Unless you can buy it for $2.
Sort of together.
Even that's too much. because these units here were problematic when they were new, and they're no better now that they're 40 plus years old. It was just a horrible design at the time. You guys are wondering why I keep muting the sound, because of that fan that's squeaking. Yeah, no, they were just a horrendous design. A lot of headaches with these things. First test. Still not moving the arm. We have a control problem.
Another thing I spy on this thing, if you look down at IC02 here, we'll see the connections here are all cracked. These are the regulators that supply power to this main logic board that controls the tone arm. So before we do anything else, I'm going to resolder the 3 regulators here. As you can see, I think all 3 of these ones are all interconnected to this board here. I can just hear someone complaining right now about that chirping. Sorry, I can't do anything about it. It squeaks. Live with it.
And no, it's not the fan itself that's squeaking, it's actually the bracket. Just ever so slight wobble. And it's just chirping, and it's a plastic ball that's sitting in a metal mount. It's like a U-joint on a car, on a drive shaft, so it can swivel around. And it's just got a slight bit of wobble to it, and it's developed a squeak. So I'll get up there and turn it slightly, and that'll fix it. But right now I'm kind of trying to concentrate on this this turntable, which is I've already spent some time on it, and I'm finding more problems. And these aren't the only bad connections on this one. That'll be like fault number 4, I think. Will be more bad connections, but we'll get there. There, you happy? I fixed the fan. Well, sort of. Oh, it's gonna come back again. Anyway, these regulators, there's a +5, a -5, and a +12. That's why there's 3 of them that control the operation of the microprocessor and the motor and the solenoids and stuff.
I'm starting to think that maybe the optical sensor here is bad. So we'll remove a screw, and we'll remove the optical sensor. What the optical sensor does is it senses the position of the tone arm in here, but you notice there's a series of little slats in it here, and then there's 2 single slats. And what this does is when the optical sensor sees light, there's two photo transistors and 2 LEDs, and when they see light passing through, they know that the arm is in its home position. As the arm starts to move, the first thing that happens is this first ridge on the aluminum or metal sheet here, I guess maybe it's steel, but it blocks the first LED, and then the second one blocks it, and as it moves over till it sees a flash of light, which indicates the 12-inch record position. The next one over is for the 7-inch, and then of course when it starts to see these ones here, this is your record end. And there's actually an adjustment over here for the record end adjustment, which it's counting these pulses as they start to appear as the arm gets to the center of the record, and you can adjust how many pulses in it counts over before it lifts the arm. If it doesn't detect these LEDs, then it's not going to work. So on the bottom of this thing, there are 2 LEDs. I think they're probably just, I don't know if they're visible light or they're infrared, but we can certainly measure them with the diode check function of my meter. So I'm in diode check mode, and we'll see whether the diodes themselves are open. So cathode, anode. I see a 1.4 volt drop on this one. And what about this one here? Aha, this one is open. this LED is open. And because the two LEDs are wired in series, if one is open, there'll be no light from the other one. Therefore, this is more than likely why this thing's not working, is this LED is shot. I don't know whether these are visible or whether they're infrared. Anyway, that's more than likely why this thing's not behaving properly. What it tries to do now is it just tries to move the arm over to the edge and stop. I got this part freed up so it actually turns, but it's not moving the arm over to the record. It's trying to reject it all the time, and that's because it's trying to reset, and because it never sees both lights basically causing a voltage drop or voltage swing on the phototransistors. Because it's never seeing the arm reaching the home position, it stops. So let me see if I can find something that I can replace that with and shine some light through and see whether that'll get this thing working. I got a new LED in there, sort of. Hopefully it will. Hopefully it'll work. I don't know if it's the right brightness or anything, but I guess we'll find out when we put this back together. Gotta get these wires out of the way here. Okay, we can check the LEDs and the photo transistors by watching the scope. When I move the tone arm, I should see two distinct switches from 5 volts down to 0. This is one of them. As you can see, that one's working. That's probably the original LED that was not working because the other one in series with it was out. Here's the other one that I replaced. So we don't have enough light, and it's because it's the wrong type of LED. I need a point source LED, and I use the diffused one. That's all I have. So we're not getting enough light shining through to trigger the phototransistor so that it can be read by the circuitry. So I got to find a different LED, and then hopefully that's going to make this thing operate properly. But we're on the right track. We know where we got to go. I just got to find an LED for it. Original is one of those little red point source LED. Oh, look at that. The leg was broken right off. That's probably the problem with it right there. Right at the junction. Anyway, that's what we need. We need one of these. Got an infrared that measures okay. I don't know whether the phototransistor is going to respond to infrared light or not. It probably will, but I guess I can try it. Okay, got the new one mounted in place. We'll put this back in the set here and put the screw in, and we'll measure it and see whether I get response from both of the phototransistors. If I get response from both of the phototransistors, then I'll hold my breath that everything else works. Okay, I'll check it with the scope again and see if it works. Got the scope hooked up. Let's take a look and see whether we get response. So this is the yellow wire. I would say that that's positive. We're getting a response. And here's the orange wire. Yep, we're getting a response. Furthermore, on the orange wire, if I move it across the record, okay, there's the first position. And where's the second position? There's the second position there. And if I look at the yellow wire, which should be the one that senses the end of the record, I'm going to have to move the turntable more off the bench so I can move the arm over. We should see a whole bunch of pulses right there that senses that the record is at the end. Things are looking up. Might work. Well, let's see if anything will happen when I press the start-stop button. That's a good sign. Okay. Not dropping. Not dropping, but at least it's moving out.
Now, the reason it's not dropping is because that clutch, I just glued it, but at this point I hadn't roughed up the surface and the glue was not adhering properly. So I got to take the clutch apart and work on that, and then we'll get this tone arm to drop.
We're back to this mechanism here. This is the gear that controls the up and down motion of the arm, and it's slipping at this clutch. Just got to figure out why this thing's not getting enough tension. It's got a spring that pulls it down, but it's not pulling it down enough to engage the clutch and turn it. If I push it by hand, you'll see that it moves the gear, but otherwise it doesn't.
For you guys wanting to know how this works, on the purple wire, that's a control line for the solenoid. When it's energized, you see it's moving the solenoid down. That's to move the tone arm. So when there's no voltage on there, movement of that gear will transfer energy to raise and lower the tone arm. When you put 12 volts to the purple wire, then when the motor turns, it'll actually move the tone arm back and forth, and the motor will go one way or the other depending on what way it wants to move the tone arm. That's how you switch from raising the arm to moving the arm.
See, this is how it should operate. When I'm pushing down on the solenoid, which would happen when the turntable does not want to raise or lower the arm, it energizes the solenoid so that it can move the arm back and forth. And then when the solenoid is de-energized, the clutch is supposed to engage, and it's supposed to transfer power into this other bottom gear like that. If I press down on it, you can see now it's moving, but it's sticking. This bottom gear is sticking, and that's part of the problem. So I put that clutch back together, and what it is the clutch itself is slipping. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to get this to go or not. I've made some improvements. If I start it up here. Tone arm's drifting back on its own for whatever reason.
Well, the reason it's drifting back is because I put some more GB weld in there to secure that clutch piece that had come apart. But now it's a little bit too thick, so now it's dragging when it tries to release the energy from the solenoid so that it doesn't move the tone arm back and forth. It's dragging on the bottom clutch. So I got to take that clutch apart yet again and now try to eliminate that drag. To say it would be so easy if you could just get the clutch, but those parts aren't available.
Okay, upon reassembly of the clutch, let's see whether the clutch is going to engage now properly. What we want to see happen is the bottom gear turns in unison with the top. This is what raises and lowers the arm, and this is what's been sticking on this unit for a bit. When the solenoid presses in, this is where it moves the tone arm, and then when the solenoid releases, it's going to turn this clutch, and this is where we're sticking a bit. We still have to get this thing to properly turn this.
So after reassembly, let's just try this thing here. It's so close. It's still not quite right. It's still, when it drops the arm, it moves over a bit, but this is for a 7-inch record. It goes over to the 7 inches and it starts to drop, but here's the problem. It might move to the left a bit there. The arm drops back a bit. It's like the brake is coming off that holds the arm in position as it's dropping. Ultimately, what was causing this arm to move back was there was some dirt on the clutch, on the side that makes contact with the tone arm. So when it was releasing the solenoid to raise and lower, there was a bit of drag in the clutch, just from some debris on there. I cleaned it up really good. I cleaned the rubber, the rubber clutch that's on the tone arm, as well as the plastic one. Cleaned it up really good, and that stopped that from happening. Another thing that's not working on this is the cueing button. It's supposed to lift the arm up and down. It's not operating. The switch is working. Piece of crap. These things were a piece of crap when they were new. They were never a very good turntable. Same with the linear tracking ones. Oh, they were a joke too. But all these so-called fully automatic turntables that relied on motors and servos and stuff, they were a source of headaches from day one. And 40 years later, they're no better. Back into the bottom of this thing again. I'm just checking the arm lift button, and it connects to this ribbon cable, which connects down to the board. And I'm not getting a voltage reading on one of the points on the board. I see it here, but I'm not seeing it at the other end. I think it may just need to be resoldered. The ribbon cable. It's hard to get at, very hard to get at on this because the wires are so short. You can't really tilt the board out of the way to turn it around to work on it. Maybe if I cut some of these wire ties, I can get a little bit of slack. Still can't get quite enough. I'm going to have to work on it under the board here. See if I can resolder this wire here. Oh yeah, it looks like it might be loose. Looks like it might be loose right on the bottom. Maybe that'll fix the arm lifting ability when you press the Q button. Okay, let's see if I've got one more of the many problems of this stupid thing solved. I just resoldered the where the switch connects to the board and goes into the microprocessor. So now if I move the tone arm over and I press the up down button, it should drop. And of course it moves when it's going to drop. Great design, guys. Great freaking design. Press the start stop button at this point. It should just start the motor because the system knows that the arm is not in its rest position due to the optical sensors. So if I press the start button, it should start playing. So you can cue a record up to the band that you want. Press the up down button, it should lift the arm. In this case, it's going to scrape the record in the process of lifting the arm. That stupid clutch that clutch really does need to be replaced. That's the problem, is that that clutch is foobar. That's the word to describe it. If I move the tone arm back to the rest and press the start stop button, it'll stop the motor. If I press the start stop button with the tone arm in its rest position, it should move the arm over to start the record, and it should just drop it straight. And of course this time it's going to do it. Maybe if I operate the mechanism enough times that clutch will free up. Because that's how it's supposed to work. And then when the record gets to the end, it triggers it to pick up. It should return the arm to the end. Of course, this time decided it didn't want to do it. If I press the start stop button, it'll probably will then return the arm. It's all that clutch. That's the cause of everything, is that clutch. Now, of course, the problem with that clutch was that friction plate that broke, that came off the nylon pressure plate, has that friction plate on it that broke off. That's the problem. I've glued that back on because that's not supposed to slip. That's supposed to be attached to that friction plate. That's what controls the mechanism to lift the arm up and down. When the solenoid is engaged, it pushes it the other way. It pushes it up in this case so that it makes contact with the tone arm, and that's what moves the tone arm. So how it works is the motor rotates in one direction to raise and lower, and it rotates in both directions to move the arm back and forth. So the motor, when you press the start stop or the up down button, will first rotate the motor with the solenoid not energized to lift the arm up like it's doing, and then once the detection switch tells the microcontroller that the arm is in the lifted position, then it moves it back. That's what's supposed to happen every time. But because that clutch itself is damaged, and I've glued it in place, but it's obviously changed the thickness of it ever so slightly, because now there's a little thin layer of glue in there as well to hold it in place, and that is just enough that's causing it to stick. But as I said before, these turntables were a piece of crap when they came out. I used to service these things, and I never saw one that worked properly. I had these things coming in just after the warranty was up, because when they were under warranty, people were taking them back to where they bought them. And but after the warranty was up, I was getting to see them, and they all had the same problems. They all had that clutch failure. This is the first time I've seen with one of the LEDs popped on it where it wasn't working at all. But that clutch problem is one that's it's a very well documented problem. The servicers that worked on these things just cringed whenever one of these things come in, and anybody that's worked on them will know. They'll know exactly what I'm talking about. We all cringed when one of these XR-Q9s came in because they were just so temperamental. There's also a counterweight missing off this one, by the way. This guy brought me this thing, but there's supposed to be a little counterweight on here that you put on. This is for the there's a little piece of fishing line that attaches to there. You'll see that it moves. That's for the anti-skate, but the counterweight's missing off this one. Let's try this thing with a record. Let's see whether it does anything. Fingers crossed. Oh, it might help if I take the lock off. Is it going to hit the record, or is it going to drop it? I think that needle's foobarred. The guy gave me with it. Also, it's quite light, but as I showed you before, that needle's kind of bent that he gave me with it. That's why I showed it right from the beginning. Up. Down. Starts working. But when it gets to the end, if I stop it, I think that's about as good as I'm going to get this turntable. Lift the arm. Yeah, it sounds real great with that broken needle. Doing a good job on my record too. And then if I hit the stop button, it'll return it back. If I hit the start stop button, start it up, beginning of the record, and drop it. I think it's working. It seems to be doing it every time now as it's supposed to. Oops, that record with that needle being like that, it's not sticking in the groove very good. Okay, I think I've got it. Oh man, this is a lot of work, this turntable. I would highly recommend not buying one of these things. Don't buy a Sansui XR-Q9. They are a real pain in the ass to work on. Very temperamental and very prone to problems. What problems did we have on this? Well, we had one of the LEDs that was bad. That's why it wouldn't operate at all, because it wasn't reading the arm position. That was part of the problem. The second problem was the stupid clutch was shot for the lifting and lowering the arm. The clutch had separated the plastic. There was bad solder connections on the regulators, and there was a bad solder connection on the up-down button here for right where it goes into the CPU. Actually, the flat cable from the little circuit board here into the main board, and then on the CPU itself. And there's probably other bad connections on this thing too, because I didn't look at all the boards, but the soldering on here is atrocious. It never ends with this piece of crap. Just testing it out. I notice I only have sound on one channel. The right channel speaker. The right channel lead. Watch what happens when I bend it. It'll go into continuity. The lead is broken. Right at the back. Right at the back here. This lead is broken. What the hell else is going to go wrong with this thing? I'm done with this turntable. I'm so fed up with this turntable. I never want to see another one of these turntables again as long as I live. Now I got to change the stupid lead for it so that it has sound on both channels. I will say that if this was my turntable, you guys would have seen a 10-pound sledgehammer go through it long before we got to this point. This needle is pretty badly shot, so that's why the sound is so distorted. The needle is broken. But see if it'll pick up at the end of the record here. Once it goes over into the middle, there it goes. Computer light comes on, so it should pick up right about now. It's operating the mechanism. And there it goes, lifts up, and returns to the beginning of the record. Returns to the arm and stops. Press start again. Beginning track. Finally, you guys have no idea how many hours I spent on this thing. And this has got to be a record. Sorry for the pun. It's got to be a record for how many hours I've spent working on a turntable that is, as I say, very problematic. When I worked in the business, we would see these things from time to time, and I would cringe, my assistant would cringe, and they were always a very expensive repair. And we used to actually change the clutch, because at the time you could get that clutch, and we would change it because that was a known issue, that clutch would separate like it did on this. But that was the only fix to really fix these things properly. Also, you have to be the rubber friction plates there have to be meticulously clean. They have to be cleaned with isopropyl alcohol. Cleanliness in that area there is ultimate. If there's any dirt or debris in there, it's going to cause it to slip, and it's going to cause problems. I think that was part of some of my problems here. The first time I put this thing, the mechanism back together, was that there was a bit of dust and debris on the actual tone arm part, and I went in and I took it apart and I just cleaned it all out with a Q-tip with isopropyl alcohol. Anyway, let's try the other record size here for a 7-inch record. And it's playing. And the up-down button. Yeah, we gotta wait till that light is out. Now we can press it. When that computer light is flashing, that means the mechanism's in the midst of a cycle, and it won't do anything until it finishes it. It's not really a computer, it's more of a logic servo. It's all mechanical controlled. There's switches, mechanical switches, to tell the system whether the arm is up or down. So when those switches are in an operating state, it doesn't really know what state it's in until the cycle finishes. And then it knows whether the arm is up or the arm is down, depending on which switch is activated by that cam gear. And then we'll drop the arm. To say, one of the reasons I think it's probably as slow as it is because that clutch is still slipping a bit. There's not a hell of a lot I can do about that other than change the clutch. And then back to the end of the record here again. And oh, I did not wait for the computer to finish its cycle, so we'll just do that again. There we go. If you try to do something while the light's still flashing, it will not register. And because this was started as a manual start, it knows that it wasn't an automatic start, so it just drops the needle at the end. It knows where the arm is, so if you start the arm midway and press the start stop button, it will just drop the needle, as I think I already explained. If I press the start stop button now after the light stops flashing, gotta wait for this light to stop. Okay, if I press the start stop button now, it'll start the cycle, and that will pick the arm up and move it back and stop it. So this thing mechanically is now working. Oh, this was a long video, and you guys have no idea because there was tons of it that were cut out. I was cursing on this thing, but the number of hours into this thing here, I couldn't charge enough for the number of hours that was spent on this. This was literally a full day to do this stupid turntable. Anyway, I'm done with it now. It's working. Just needs a new needle. The guy told me he put a new needle on there. Well, the one that's on there was, when I took it off, was broken, as I showed you guys at the beginning. Anyway, thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, and let's get my numbers up to over 100,000. We'll catch you in the next one. Bye.